Obviously, you did not die in flames on December 21st, so that's the T-shirt. I'm going to be talking about Native American prophecies today. Got a few announcements in the bulletin. It says, welcome new and returning students to the beginning of a new term here at CLL. This is the 20th year that we have provided this service to our community. Most volunteer organizations only last between 5 and 6 years, so we are very proud indeed of our organization. I am looking forward to my classes so I can learn something new. One of life's greatest pleasures is doing just that, learning something new. Also, we are always trying to add new classes to our curriculum. So if you have an idea for a new class, please contact me or a member of the board. This is written by Billy Walker. We have a very good registration this term with almost 400 students signing up. Thank you so much for your support. I guess the premise of the class is that each of the world's major religions contains Messianic prophecies, where the founder of the religion either promised to personally return or to send another like himself. So you'll find this tradition in Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrian, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, American Indian. So what I propose to do is just give you an overview of what they actually promised, what they actually said, and primarily to show that maybe they're not in competition, that maybe they're all interconnected, interrelated, more like an orchestra where you have different kinds of instruments. You have the woodwinds, the brass, the percussion, the strings, these kind of things. Each is different, yet when they come together, it's like an orchestra. Does anybody know what the word apocalypse means? The original Greek?
Revealing?
Yes.
Unveiling?
Yes, unveiling. So the prefix apo in Greek means to go out. A kalypse is something that is hidden. So it literally means revelation. So when you speak of the book of Revelation at the end of the Bible, it's also called the apocalypse, and apocalypse means revelation. It does not mean destruction. It does not mean annihilation. It means a renewing. And that's actually what the book of Revelation is about. It's not about the end of the world. It's about the rebirth of the world. It talks about a time when all things will be made new. So I'll be getting into that. I think I will. I have a disclaimer, what I'm going to show you. We're holding things up till you shut up. So, Dr. Seuss. So Dr. Seuss is the author of things like The Cat in the Hat. And what's your favorite Dr. Seuss cartoon? Anybody think of any?
Green Eggs and Ham.
There you go, Green Eggs and Ham. So in 1977 in Lake Forest, just north of Chicago, he gave the graduation speech to the college. And this is the entire text of his speech to the graduating class. And the title of the speech is, My Uncle Terwilliger on the Art of Eating Popovers. And this is what Dr. Seuss said. My uncle ordered popovers from the restaurant's bill of fare, and when they were served, he regarded them with a penetrating stare. Then he spoke great words of wisdom as he sat there on that chair. To eat these things, said my uncle, you must exercise great care. You may swallow down what's solid, but you must spit out the air. And as you partake of the world's bill of fare, that's darn good advice to follow. Do a lot of spitting out of hot air and be careful what you swallow. So, if there's a mantra for this class, I think this is it. Swallow down what's solid, spit out what's not. As I said, I love discussions. I don't mind disagreements, so please. Please feel welcome to do that. Does anybody know what the word religion means, where it comes from? Religio is the word. So in the Greek, the word re means to do again. And ligio is like the ligaments in your arms or your joints of your body. It's the connecting tissue. So religio actually means to reconnect. I guess there's a number of things that you could reconnect to. Reconnect an individual to God, God with the individual, individual to individual, individual to a group. There's all different possibilities. So hopefully that's what we can accomplish here a little bit. We have any snowbirds here? There's a snowbird. Where are you from?
Iowa.
Iowa, okay. Iowa is how deep in snow right now?
Yes, quite deep.
Yeah, about hip deep. I actually used to live in South Dakota, so it's right next door. But part of my family, when they got off the boat, went straight to South Dakota and got a job on the railroad. So I remember South Dakota winters, which is right next to Iowa. So we lived in the southeast corner. And one of my best friends in grade school was a Lakota Indian boy. And we still correspond with each other. So in that vein, in that, can I get each person to just say a little bit about themselves and what their interest is in the class and what you would like to learn? Is there any kind of topic you would like me to cover or to address? And what's your name?
Nancy.
Nancy. Here's Nancy. Hi, Nancy. So hopefully we can all become friends with Nancy. So what is your background?
Oh, my background is I worked for 25 years planning conventions.
Okay.
And I've been retired now since 2000. And I thought this would be interesting and maybe help me learn a little more about, I've read, what are the books called? It got me interested in this whole subject. The book by, I think his name's LaHaye.
LaHaye, yeah.
Yeah.
The Left Behind series.
Left Behind series.
Okay.
And that kind of got me interested in this whole subject and
okay.
prophecies and things like that.
Okay. Good. So you were Barb, is that correct?
Nancy.
Nancy, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm Nancy.
Yeah, I'm Vivian Thompson, and as I said, I'm from Iowa. We've been coming down here. We're snowbirds. We've been coming down here for 18 years. In my working years, I worked for the Department of Human Services, and which is, or social services, you would call them here in Florida. And my husband comes with me, and I have 2 sons who are retired military.
Okay, and what did you want to learn in the class, or is there anything specific?
I guess I'm always in my mind of having a hard time reconciling other religions with Christianity.
Okay.
And where do we...
How's it all fit together?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, part of what I do is I give quizzes. And I take a quote from a religion, read the quote, and then have the class try to guess what religion it's from. And you'll find that in many cases you can't even tell what religion the quote is from, since they all teach the same things. So,
I'm Margaret.
Margaret?
This is my husband Yan too.
So what is your background?
We both are science. I'm chemistry, he's
okay.
engineer. And since we are Chinese, so we grow up with Buddhism.
Okay, Buddhist,
yeah.
Okay.
So it's really interesting for us to find out what's relationship.
So I will do a module on Buddhism and Buddhist prophecies. So is he allowed to talk? What was your name?
She always said for me.
Okay. What she said. That's.
Oh, my dad's yes. I'm retired in
Maybe religions all had Messianic parts to them. I'm
Yeah.
wondering why, and
Yeah.
anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah. It's a process. It's a continuing unfolding process. And people that, I guess, go to church pretty much know about what happened in Israel, but they don't pay much attention to what might have happened in Syria or Iraq or Persia or even India, Turkey, Greece, Rome. It's all, half the Bible, actually most of the Bible, has more to do with Turkey and Greece than it does with Israel. The New Testament really has nothing to do with Israel, because by that time Israel was gone. The Romans destroyed Israel in AD 70. So Paul and Peter and those kind of apostles lived primarily in Turkey and Greece, and then they died in Rome. So most of the New Testament is actually from Europe. But, and we'll talk about that.
My name's Carol Turner.
Carol?
I'm a retired registered nurse.
Snowbird from Wisconsin,
Where?
right around the Madison area.
Okay. So the university?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason I picked the course is I just read the description. I thought it would be interesting, and here I am.
Good.
First choice.
Good. So do you have any specific questions that you would like to have answered?
I don't know, not at this point.
Okay.
But, maybe it'll come
Well,
up later.
questions are totally okay. So, and I would rather get a discussion going than stand up here and talk the entire time. So I can do that if I have to, but I'd rather hear what you have to say too.
I'm just curious, like everybody else, about the similarities between the world's religions.
Mm-hmm. So
I have a question.
Go ahead.
You said the religion was partly based on the fact that some areas were isolated, etc.
Yes.
With our improved transportation, communication, etc. Would you say that in 100 years from now we'll be much more homogeneous?
I really don't advocate being homogeneous.
No, I didn't say advocate. I said, do you think?
Well, I think there's an understanding that, and again, if you can appreciate the other person's differences, you don't have to follow whatever religion your friend is from India. You can still stay what you are, but you can appreciate them as a person and still. There are so many times in history that not only could you not be friends, but you were almost obligated to kill him. That's what the Crusades were. And to a great extent, whenever anybody moved into any other area, it was pretty much a crusade against those people and their economy and their government and their religion. And again, the same is true with even within the religions to fight each other. Today I'm going to be talking about the Native Americans, since we narrowly survived the.
How about a bio on you? How about more of a bio on you?
On me.
Yeah, what's your last name, for example?
My last name is Smith. First name is Joel. We're supposed to wear these name tags now. I've just been studying this stuff for about 40 years.
You from here?
My son was stationed at Hurlburt. We used to come here on vacation to visit him and used to wonder, what am I doing living in Illinois? So we lived in Carbondale, Southern Illinois for 28 years. And the economy in Southern Illinois is based on coal mining, and coal mining tanked, and the economy tanked. And so my wife was a supervisor at the hospital, and she came home one day and she said, had a job review today, and I was told that my job performance is fine, I just didn't have a job. And she's sitting there crying, and I said, okay, we're going to move to Florida. So had a grandkid here, so we came here and helped him grow up. He's now 18 and in college in Pensacola. My son at Hurlburt got out of the Air Force and went back to school. Now he's a chiropractor in Pensacola. My youngest son has been in the Air Force about 12 years. Right now he's stationed in Spangdahlem in Germany with his wife and 2 kids. But he's deployed right now to Bagram, Afghanistan. My oldest son went to school, got a degree in physical therapy, moved to Atlanta and started a construction business. So figure that one out. As far as my personal views, I have pretty much a universal viewpoint. I can see the good in each one of the religions. Obviously, there are people who follow the teachings and others who are still struggling to do that. For centuries, millennia probably, the world was a very tiny place, and each person had their own little corner of the world. And in November, I actually went back to Germany, and I drove about an hour and 20 minutes from where my son is stationed to my family's hometown, where my family is from going back to at least the 1600s. So it was really something to stand there and to think that this is the same hills, the same land, the same meandering stream that my ancestors looked at in the 1600s. You know, maybe this is the same meandering stream that my great-great-great-great-grandfather first stole a kiss from grandma. You know, these kind of stories. And talking with people there, of course, was a language barrier, but they said that in Germany, about every 40 years, they collect all the tombstones, grind them up, and use them to pave the roads. So there really are no old cemeteries, at least out in the country. So that's kind of sad, but my ancestors would have been probably farmers. Name is Smith, so probably worked in metal. So they probably got buried on their family farm somewhere. But I would have had no idea where it would have been. So it was interesting to go back and to see that. But the world at that time was so tiny, my ancestors probably never traveled more than 15 or 20 miles from where they were born. I can get on a plane and be in Germany in 10 or 12 hours. So that's how much the world has changed. So because of that, well, professionally, I do appliance repair. So the big appliance truck out in the parking lot, that's me. So I fix refrigerators and washers and dryers, and I work primarily for rental management companies. But a principle of refrigeration is when you compress something, it gets hot. So that's what's happening in the world. The cultures who have been so isolated from each other for centuries and millennia are now being compressed into one world, one globe. If you look at a Google picture of the Earth, you don't see the lines of the countries. So you've got the different governments, the different languages, the different cultures, the different religions. They're all coming in. They're all being compressed. They're coming in contact, and to a great extent, conflict with each other. So that's why this kind of presentation is necessary, to help you expand your horizons, to look past some of the traditional barriers, the traditional hatreds, and to see, especially for the people who've lived overseas, to realize that people are pretty much just people. They have different ways of doing things, but just because they do something a little bit differently doesn't mean that they're wrong. But so that's kind of my background, and I try to cultivate an appreciation of all viewpoints. Again, that doesn't mean I have to adopt it in my own personal life, but that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate it. And so just kind of expand your horizons. I think if there are three areas that I think that are going to be essential for people to recognize in the coming years, the coming decades, one is the essential unity of the religions. I don't begin to understand the concept of God. Somehow there's an intelligence somewhere that from age to age has spoken to humanity. I don't begin to understand that process. All I'm trying to do is just try to show you the effect of it. I also don't understand electricity. I work with electricity every day. But you can't see it. You can't touch it. Just standing there looking at it, you can't even prove that it exists. I guess it's kind of the same with God. That, I heard a story one time where if you accept the idea of the atomic theory of atoms and particles and neutrons and protons and all these things, that each one of us is made up of a pretty much 99.999% energy. So you actually shouldn't even exist as physical. And yet you are knowing, you are loving, you're compassionate, you have the capacity to learn, to interact. And that's kind of the same thing I think view in the big picture is what God might be. I could be dead wrong. Anyhow, that's kind of my background. So, December 21st, we did not die. There was no Mayan apocalypse. And again, the word apocalypse means revelation. And that's what someone pointed out one time. If the Mayans were so smart, why did they allow the Europeans to destroy them? This is the T-shirt. So I've actually been to Central America 5 times. And so I've been to Belize and Guatemala. And some people there set it up, so I actually got to live in the homes with Mayan Indians. So that was kind of neat. You know, to be in an environment where I was the only white guy there, and surrounded by 40 or 50 Mayans. And the thing that really struck me is that how Asian they look. So they may have actually come across the Bering Strait or made the trip across the ocean. Or I've been told that they've studied the blood types, and they've discovered that the Mayan blood is pretty much the same as the Chinese. So you could actually move to Central America and they probably wouldn't look twice at you. But so I actually got to live in the homes of Mayan Indians. They set it up also, so I lived with Garifuna people. The Garifuna were Africans being brought over as slaves. The slave ship crashed in St. Lucia, and the Africans escaped. So they're called the Garifuna, or the Gari-Ganadu, is their name. They still live in Belize, in primarily Honduras. They still speak their African dialect. They like living on the ocean where there's a river, fresh water and salt water. They fish, they farm. So I got to live with them too. This is in Guatemala. This is Tikal, one of the greatest of the ancient Mayan ruin sites. It's a huge city. It was a city of 100,000 people. This is the main temple plaza. This is Temple 1, the temple of the giant jaguar. Temple 2. Over here is a complex of about another 12 temples. To the south right here is the administrative complex. So this is Temple 1. I've actually climbed that. We were there last year again, and now they don't let people climb the temples anymore. In fact, they had a big rally there, meeting there for December 21st, I guess, to await the end of the world. And they said that the thousands of people who were there actually damaged some of the temples. But there are 5 very large, tall temples like this. There's pyramids. You could walk probably for hours and not see all of it, all the buildings. And just to the right of Temple 1 here is a ball court. And I've got a video here I'm going to show you in a second. There's a tree right there that was full of toucans. So again, Mayans were a race of people about 4'8". They had no metal tools, no beasts of burden, and they built mountains of stone. And each one of these are called roof combs, were in their original form were decorated with the hieroglyphics. And so this, the one on the left, is called the Temple of the Giant Jaguar. This is Temple 1, Temple 2, Temple 1. The wooden roof beams up in the sanctuaries are carved with elaborate figures. And they still exist. They've been there for 1,500 years. So as you're walking through Tikal, you see these kind of things, these stone slabs. These are covered with hieroglyphics. This is a pyramid that's not even excavated yet. This is Temple 2. If you remember the Reebok commercial a number of years back with them running up a temple, this is it. I got up at before dawn. I was there about 10 years ago, and went out to the main temple plaza to watch the sunrise. And so I sat, actually, there's a platform right here. I sat on the platform and watched the sun come up. And it's amazing to hear the jungle wake up. The different species of birds. There's parrots, there's toucans, there's orapendula, bird of paradise birds. There's spider monkeys, howler monkeys. It's an astonishing place to be. And this is, like I said, built by a race of people, 4'8". And I understand that they would build these temples in 52-year cycles. They would build the temple for 52 years and then quit. So as I said, there are 5 very large temples like this. This is a stone covered with hieroglyphics. That's actually me about 10, 12 years ago. Again, stones laying every which way, covered with hieroglyphics. This is a pyramid again, another pyramid, totally untouched. So the woods are full of snakes. You got to watch where you walk, and tarantulas and monkeys and toucans. This is a video I took of a spider monkey. He's way up in a tree, and he's reaching in the tree, and he's scooping water out and drinking water. And at the base of Temple 1 was a tree full of toucans. So there may have been 20 toucans in this tree. And he probably was no more than 10 feet away from me. So in the top left there's a photograph of the toucan. The adaptation of his beak is interesting. It looks like he's got teeth, and so he looks very fierce. Toucans fly kind of like this because they're so top heavy. The roof combs on the temples have slits in them, and at certain times of the year the priest could sit down in a certain spot on the ground, and through the slits would line up Venus or Saturn, or they were experts on astronomy. And again, every which way, everywhere, there's stones covered with hieroglyphics. This is Temple 5. This is a different temple. Again, it's gigantic. It's a mountain of stone. This area in the trees right above there, there's filled with howler monkeys. So you walk under the trees, and if you're not careful, the howler monkeys will pee on you. So you kind of walk and look up. And howler monkeys are probably the loudest animal that there is. They kind of make their mouth into a megaphone, and it's astonishing how much sound they can make. So the roof combs on top of the temples are hollow. So this is actually laying on my back on the floor up in the sanctuary. This is looking up into the roof comb, so it's hollow up in there. But you can see the wooden lintels are carved. This one particular right here is a hand holding a three-bladed knife and a floral motif. But this is an image of a priest wearing a jaguar mantle with two retainers holding the mantle out. He's got a knife in his hand. And the jaguar priest is called Chilam Balam, which means jaguar priest. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the prophecy of Chilam Balam. So there also is a museum there where they take some of these are priceless carvings. And so they've gotten them out of the weather. This is a different Mayan site. This is in Belize. This is Lamani. This is a mouth, nose, eyes, wearing a jaguar mantle. This is probably 12 feet tall. And there were two of them flanking the side of this temple. In a little, Lamani is not that big. So last time we were in Belize, there's a cave tour that you can take. It's a very rugged tour. I can remember you had to walk to get to the cave entrance. So I had shorts on and very congested path. So we had to cross the stream several times, and the water is about this deep, so I was walking across the water holding my pants up, and the guide is looking back at me, laughing at me, because when you get to the entrance of the cave, you have to dive in and swim in. So we dove in, swam in, a very rugged climb to get up there, and you get up inside this cave, and it's a Mayan burial site. So they would have the pottery in this cave, and what they would do is take the pot upside down, put incense or some kind of burning material underneath it to make smoke, knock a hole in the pot, and the smoke from the hole in the pot would symbolize the release of the spirit from the body. So this is a skull, and these skulls have been here for so long that the water dripping down from the ceiling has literally calcified them and glued them to the floor. So you could not actually remove them. This is a skeleton of they estimate about an 18-year-old girl. But the whole area is full of bones and skeletons. This is called the ATM tour in Belize. It's Aktun Tunicho Muktal is the cave. They don't really know how much longer they're going to be able to have the tour, since they've basically got areas lined out with plastic tape where you can walk, and all it takes is one tourist to fall on one of these things and crush it, and it's gone forever. And they can't even remove these things because they're glued to the floor. So again, when I was in Belize, I set it up so I got to live in the homes of Mayan Indians. And this is one of the families that I stayed with. And Mayans have a living hut and a cooking hut. So they have two different buildings. Apparently they learned that cooking huts routinely burn down, so they didn't want to burn down your house too, so they have two different huts. So this is a Mayan cooking hut that I videotaped the grandparents of my host. That's a pot full of beans, and that's Grandma making tortillas. The thing that I learned is the Mayans are just people, and they're no different than you or me. They have pretty much the same wants and needs, and if you can hear them, they're actually speaking Mayan. If you notice the ceiling, as it pans up at the end of the video, the ceiling is crystallized with black soot. She's been doing this for so long that the roof is crystallized. See that? So it's actually shiny from the soot. So I thought that was kind of neat. So there actually are Mayan prophecies and Native American prophecies. The city that I showed you the temples was Tikal in Guatemala, and I think this is Tikal. Either that, it's just something that an artist made up, but that's pretty much what Tikal would have looked like 1,500 years ago. So the Europeans initially depicted the Indians as primitive and barbaric, as if Europeans at that time weren't primitive and are barbaric too. But we're getting a different picture of what the Indians look like, or what their culture was actually like. So they found, the Europeans found cities well versed in the arts and sciences, following a finely ordered system of law. And the cities were actually cleaner than anything in Europe. And after maintaining silence for generations, the elders are now speaking of their traditions and their religions. And so what they say is that the world is at a turning point, and that its choices today will determine the future course of civilization. Doesn't take much to see that that's true. So they're trying to remain true to their sacred teachings, to live in the way of brotherhood and simplicity, establishing harmony with one another and with all living things. Many of the Mayans that I got to stay with in Belize were very proud of the fact that their children only spoke Mayan. So in that sense, they preserved that part of the culture, but it also cut these children off from the outside world because they don't speak English or Spanish. But that's their choice. So what the Mayans actually teach, or what the Native Americans, including North America, this is a time of purification. So we see a breakdown of the old, chaos and destruction, but we also see a rebirth of the new. It's a time for the reuniting of the races, and barriers of religion and nationality will begin to fall away as people realize their essential unity. And so the three things that I see that are happening in the world as part of this process of growth is the recognizing of the essential unity of the religions, the realization that we are actually all one species of people on this planet, that differences of race are pretty much just artificial. You know, we're all one species. Any person of any race anywhere on the planet could marry a person of any other race on the planet, and they could still produce totally normal functioning children. So that would tell us that biologically we're all one people. So the differences are primarily just in culture, in geography, and language. And the Mayans predict that one or more great teachers will come to guide us in the future.
Now this is what the Mayans are saying today.
This is what the Native Americans are saying, yes, and the Mayans in particular. So the whole Mayan apocalypse thing,
we're not entering a period of whatever.
It's not annihilation.
Years ago, it's now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you look at the world 100 years ago, it's totally different than it is now. Just about anything that you can think of. Travel, communication, arts, literature, medicine, farming, it's all different. So one of the names of the Mayan Messiah is called Bahana. He's a savior figure, and in this author's opinion, it really is no different than the Christian belief in the second coming of Jesus. By the way, the term second coming in the Bible does not exist. It does not speak of a second coming. He says that I will come again. That's what he says. So, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. That so there's a story in Mayan and Native American tradition that there was a teacher similar to Jesus who taught spiritual mysteries and ethical way of life. And when he left, he promised to return. At a time when the earth would be in great turmoil to guide humanity to the future, he is best known by the names of Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan. Two different names, two different cultures, Aztec and Mayan, but the same individual. This shows a serpent with the human face, and Quetzalcoatl is called the feathered serpent or the feathered snake. So the Hopis in the southwest speak of the return of Bahana, their true white brother who left them in ancient times promising to return. They wear their hair in bangs to form a window, they say, in which so their elder can recognize him when he returns, so they can recognize him, and an identifying mark for the elder brother to recognize them. The Hopi are the custodians of the stone tablets. And this is one of the Hopi elders, and he's holding one of the stone tablets in his hand. And I'm going to show a video to end the class that explains the tablets, and it's fascinating.
That white brother, is that like white Caucasian brother?
That's what they say, yeah. From the east. Bearded white men from the east is what they say. Again, swallow down with solid, spit out the hot air. So, take it or leave it. So in South Dakota, black elk and crazy horse were leaders of the Lakota in the 1800s, which saw the United States government try to exterminate the Indians. But each black elk and crazy horse had a vision of the future. So black elk saw that his people would be plagued. That's actually a photograph of black elk. Would be plagued by famine and sickness and war. They would lose heart, and the sacred hoop of his nation would be broken. But he saw a vision of his own nation being reunited after 7 generations and becoming part of a greater hoop of all the nations of the earth. So the Native Americans speak of the medicine wheel, the hoop of the world, the hoop of the nation, the hoop of the people. And one of their traditions is that a day will come when the hoop of all the nations will come together as one hoop. And they call it the hoop of many hoops. And that's one of the reasons for the hoop dance in Lakota. So he also saw the daybreak star rising in the east and heard a voice that said, "It shall be a relative to them. And who shall see it shall see much more, for from there comes wisdom. And those who do not see it shall be dark." So apparently Black Elk thought that this meant that a great prophet from the east would bring a message to his people.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, please do.
I should have asked it earlier, but didn't they do a lot of human sacrifice? And
Yeah.
when did they finally stop doing that?
They probably stopped when the Spanish destroyed their culture.
Okay.
But I personally think that the human sacrifice really didn't have much to do with the religion. It had more to do with, as in Europe, where they had the various city-states, there really was no nation in Europe for most of the medieval times. Same thing is true in Guatemala. Each one of the cities was autonomous. So they would just routinely go off and capture other people and bring them back and cut their hearts out, partially as a warning to stay away. How much of that it had to do with the religion, I really haven't seen much.
Oh, okay.
Europeans routinely massacred and butchered people in Europe too. So Temple 1, the tall one in the first image, they used to take people up to the top of that, bind their ankles to their wrists behind, bend them backwards, lay them over a stone, and rip the heart out, hold it up, here's the still beating heart. And it was kind of a game that they played. They would then kick them down the stairs and see how long they roll. But hopefully by that time they'd be dead anyway. But there were similar things in Europe. I don't think it really has much to do with religion. So they spoke of the hoop of many hoops coming together, the nations of the world coming together. And supposedly one of the stories is that the Creator created the 4 races of men. They have the medicine wheel with the 4 directions. The 4 races of men is symbolized as the black, white, yellow, and red. One of the traditions is that there will come a time in history that the Creator created the 4 races of men and scattered them to the world. And that a time would come when, in just about the same period of time, the 4 races of men would come back together on the North American continent. If they would come together as brothers, there would be a great civilization that would develop out of this. If they would not come back together as brothers, there would be a time of turmoil and tribulation. And so this is what they're talking about. So the 4 races of men came back together on the North American continent at just about the same time period. Europeans came, they brought the African slaves, they brought the Asians to work on the railroads, and the Native Americans were already here. They did not come back together as brothers, so there was a time of tribulation. There's a tradition that where the Indian people would become like the tree of the Indian people would become like a dead stick. And it said they stick the stick in the ground, and a time will come when the stick would begin to blossom and grow, and it would grow into a great tree, and the tree would be a home for the birds and the animals, and it speaks of the white roots of the tree. This is referred to as the great white roots of peace prophecy, the rebirth of the Native American people, the coming back together of the 4 races of men. This is what the Mayan and the Native American prophecies are about, these kind of things, not the destruction, not the annihilation. So Crazy Horse saw his people gradually awakening after the last war and beginning to dance again under the sacred tree. You saw the coming of automobiles and airplanes. The video I'm going to show talks about this. So Crazy Horse saw the dancing along with his people were representatives of all the races who had become brothers. So thus he foresaw that the world would be made whole again, not just by his own nation, but by all peoples working together. These people were treated as savages. Daganoweda was the Iroquois. He created the Iroquois Confederacy, which banded the tribes in the Great Lakes area together. He again saw turmoil and destruction that would destroy the lives and culture of the Confederacy tribes, but he also saw a time beyond that when a great prophet would come who would be a world uniter. He would come in the same spirit of other prophets before him, but would renew the spirit of man in a way more worldwide and all-embracing than ever before in history. It actually is a photograph of Daganoweda. So at the same time in Peru, you have the Quechua, the Incan people. Predicted that the white man's coming would bring 500 years of materialism and imbalance. But then they say that this era will come to an end, and the age of Aquarius will signal the return of light to the planet and the dawn of a golden era. So the time that they're talking about is now. We live in a time that is, as I said, everything in the world that we do is different than it was 100 years ago. And This is the time that they were all speaking about. In fact, the time that we live in now is the time where it's coming to fruition. We're no longer in the beginning stages of this anymore. We're well beyond the road, and we can see the necessity for these kind of things. And we can see that the willingness of people to cooperate with each other. Again, when I was in Germany, the thing that I noticed was that you can drive into Austria, Luxembourg, any of the countries there. There's not any border guards anymore. You know, the Europeans have decided that they're all basically just one country now. They're trying to build one economy. They've got one monetary unit, the euro. So we're living in a time of fulfillment, a time when humanity should cure itself. And it's not just physical diseases, obviously, there's spiritual diseases. And give help to the poor, regenerate yourself, help those who have poverty of the soul, return to the inner spirit which we have abandoned while looking elsewhere for happiness. So the recognition of the oneness of religion, the recognition of the oneness of humanity, and the recognition that this is the time when women need to be given equal status to men. Yes?
There's like an Indian philosophy, Vedic philosophy, that they have this time called yugas, and
Yes.
it's divided into like 4 different categories:
Yes.
the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age,
Yes.
and the Iron Age.
Yes.
And according to them, we're in the Iron Age right now,
Right.
which is a lot of decadence and suffering in this
Right.
dark age compared to the Golden Age.
Yes.
It's kind of like a sine wave or a circle.
So this
that
is
you imagine.
Indians you're talking about, not, yes.
And that also coincides with, like this is the end of the Pisces age and
Yes.
the Aquarius.
Yes.
So we have like about 2,000 years of Pisces, and being in Pisces, and now we're changing into Aquarius, and we're at the crux of our nexus point in time. And also in the Bible, with the 7-year tribulation, it is tremendous darkness. And I think what's happening now is we're seeing that, like, in our country, in our entire world, we have 1% of the wealth hoarded with very wealthy people,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other 99% are suffering.
Yes. Yeah.
So because of the increase in suffering and the increase in darkness, and this is all caused by greed,
Yes.
money,
Yes.
that if they just switched over from fossil fuels to, green energy, all the people in the world could have a source of energy,
Yes.
or zero-point energy or anything like that, but we could all have no electric bills, no gasoline bills. But
Clean water, access to health care, all these things.
But we cannot have those things because the people and the 1%ers, about 300 ruling families that own trillions and trillions of
Yeah.
dollars invested in oil, will not let us have the next stage of green energy they want is on fossil fuels. So they're preventing us from
Right.
moving ahead and having the entire world there would be no starvation.
Yes.
And there will be peace on earth and all those things of the golden age that are available to us. But because of the suppression of knowledge and the greed of money, those access to those things are being prevented.
Yep.
So that's why we're in a dark age.
I couldn't agree more. Any other comments?
Who said that?
Well, she initially was speaking about...
They measure time in yugas, and it has to do with the Earth's and Sun's orbit around the Milky Way galaxy, their position in the...
So this is India, Indians.
6,000-year cycle that we're going through, and every 13,000 years,
Yeah.
you're in a certain position. It's just a natural, like
Right.
winter, summer, spring, fall. It's just a natural
Yeah.
scientific
Yeah.
progression of a season that we're
Yeah.
in.
Well, in the book of Daniel, it speaks of a statue, and the statue is symbolized by the gold, silver, copper, and iron. Again, the 4. So that's in the Bible, too. It's in all the religions. In fact, that's one of the classes I'll be presenting is not so much in the India Indian, it's there too. But the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim religions have Messianic prophecies, and the same numbers keep appearing, and the same idea of the four. And in fact, Daniel, talking about the 4 stages of the statue, it gives you a timetable that goes with that. So when the Bible talks about the end of the age or the end of days, it's not talking about the end of the world, it's the end of that cycle. That's what it's talking about. So I'll be getting into that later on. So Quetzalcoatl promised to return. Supposedly he forbade the blood sacrifice.
Do we know when he showed up?
I think it was 1168 is when the calendar begins. I'm getting a little bit short on time. We have to end in about 17 minutes.
Some of the quick comments that right here could have been a pre-incarnate Jesus that we're familiar with. At that time, the Mayans were serving this dark force. The high priest hoarded all the knowledge.
Yeah.
Whenever you see hoarding of the knowledge and money in the elite, and then everybody else is suffering, that is a negative dark force. And I think what happened was, with these dark rituals that they used to do, they used to have a manifestation of a dark force. So they did all these hard sacrifices in order to get a manifestation of a dark force.
Yep.
And I think what it is that the positive force, the ones that we know as God and Jesus, were offended by that. So maybe every time there is an ascended master, or depending on what you believe as God, the Son of God, tries to teach the people benevolence and kindness and sharing, because the forces that are in control are so dark and keeping people suffering. So it's kind of like they're kind of sent in as a balance because of the nature of the people in control are doing so much harm to the people.
Yep.
So, that's why like you see Buddha coming into existence and Jesus.
Sure.
And I guess
Quetzalcoatl, yeah.
It's just a benevolent ascended master.
Well, I think this is kind of what you were just saying, that the return does not necessarily mean the return of the same physical being, but the return of the same spiritual message coming from another great prophet. That what if the same voice is speaking through all of them? Israel had prophets. At the beginning of the book of Hebrews, the Apostle Paul says that God has sent many prophets at many times, many different places, and more recently has sent Jesus. That's how the book of Hebrews starts out. So he acknowledges the progression of the prophets, the same voice speaking through all of them. And I did a search one time on the internet, how many prophets appeared in the Bible, and the answer came up about 50. So if you can believe that the voice of God returned in 50 people in the Bible, why can't you expand your horizons to also believe that the voice also spoke to Central and South America? Again, swallow down with solid, spit out the hot air. I really wanted to show this. I'm going to cut this presentation short, and because I wanted to, got about 14 minutes left, and I've got a video that talks about a lot of this. So this individual speaks of the return of the prophets.
And as I begin to travel around with the drum, and learn, I learned that Native people have many prophecies about this time. I begin to hear these over and over. And so I kind of more or less memorized a lot of them. And what I'd like to do now is share with you some of those. Say at the beginning of each cycle of time, the Great Spirit comes down through a messenger. He makes a strong appearance upon the earth. And we are coming to an end of a cycle now. It's not the first cycle. There was a cycle of spirit There was a cycle of the mineral, the rock. There was a cycle of the plant. And now we're in the cycle of the animal, coming to the end of that and beginning the cycle of the human being. When we get into the cycle of the human being, the highest and greatest powers that we have will be released to us and be released from that light or soul that we carry to the mind. But right now we're coming to the end of the animal cycle when we have investigated ourselves and learned what it is to be like an animal on this earth. And at the beginning of this cycle of time, long ago, the Great Spirit came down and he made an appearance. He gathered the peoples of the earth together, they say, on an island that is now beneath the water. And he said to the human beings, he said, I'm going to send you to 4 directions, and over time I'm going to change you to 4 colors. But I'm going to give you some teachings, and you will call these the original teachings. And when you come back together with each other, you will share these so that you can live and have peace on earth, and a great civilization will come about. And he said, during this cycle of time, I'm going to give each of you 2 stone tablets. And he said, when I give you those stone tablets, don't cast them upon the ground. Because if any of the brothers and sisters of the 4 directions and the 4 colors cast their stone tablets on the ground, not only will the human beings have a hard time, but almost the earth itself would die. And so he gave us each a responsibility, and we call that the guardianship. And to the Indian people, the red people, he gave the guardianship of the earth. And we were to learn during this cycle of time the teachings of the earth and the plants that grow from the earth and the foods that you can eat and the herbs that are healing. So that when we came back together with the other brothers and sisters, we could share this knowledge with them, because something good was to happen on the earth. And to the south, he gave the yellow race of people the guardianship of the wind, and they were to learn about the sky and breathing and how to take that within ourselves for spiritual advancement. And they were to share that with us in this time. And to the west, where there's blackness of night, he gave the black race of people the guardianship of the water, and they were to learn the teachings of the water, which is the chief of the elements. It is the most humble and also the most powerful. When I went to the University of Washington and learned that it was a black man that invented blood plasma, it didn't surprise me, because blood is water. And the elders already told me that black people would bring the teachings of water to humanity. And to the north, where there's white snow on this continent, he gave the white race of people the guardianship of the fire. And if you look at the center of many of the things they do, you will find the fire. In this light bulb, they say that is a white man's fire. If you look at the center of a car, you will find a spark. If you look at the center of the airplane, the train, you will find the fire. And the fire moves, also consumes. This is why it was the white brothers and sisters that began to move upon the face of the earth and reunite us as a human family. Because they had the guardianship of the fire, this was their responsibility. And so a long time passed, and the Great Spirit gave each of the 4 races 2 stone tablets. Ours are kept at the Hopi Reservation in Arizona, at 4 Corners area on 3rd Mesa. And we were given a sacred handshake to show when we came back together as brothers and sisters that we remembered the teachings. And it was indicated on the stone tablets that the Hopis have that the first brothers and sisters that would come back to them would come as turtles across the land. They would be human beings, but they would come as turtles. So when the time came close, the Hopis built a special village to welcome the turtles that would come across the land. And they got up in the morning and looked out at sunrise, and they looked out across the desert and they saw the Spanish conquistadors coming covered in armor like turtles across the land. So this was them. So they went out to the Spanish man and they extended their hand, hoping for the handshake, but into the hand the Spanish man dropped a trinket. And so word spread throughout North America that there was going to be a hard time, that maybe some of the brothers and sisters had forgot the sacredness of all things, and all the human beings were going to suffer for this on the earth. People came on the East Coast, and they went across this land to the east, and we were told in the prophecies that we should try to remind all the people that would come here of the sacredness of all things. And if we could do that, there would be peace on earth. But if we did not do that, when the roads went clear from east to west, And when the other races or colors of the earth had walked clear across this land, if by that time we had not come together as a human family, the Great Spirit would grab the earth with his hand and shake it. When they got to the west coast of this land, they said they would then begin to build a black ribbon, and on this black ribbon they would move a bug. And when you begin to see this bug moving on the land, that was a sign for the first shaking of the earth. And this first shaking of the earth would be so violent that this bug would be shaken off the earth into the air, and it would begin to move and fly in the air. And by the end of this shaking, this bug would be in the air around the world. And behind it would be a trail of dirt. And eventually, the whole sky of the entire earth would become dirty from these trails of dirt. And this would cause many diseases that would get more and more complicated. So the bug moving on the land, of course, it's easy to see now. In 1908, the Model T Ford was mass-produced for the first time. So the elders knew the first shaking of the earth was about to come about. That's the First World War. In the First World War, the airplane came into wide usage for the first time. That was the bug moving into the sky. And so then they knew that something very important would happen. There would be an attempt to make peace on earth on the west coast of this land, and so the elders began to watch for this. And they began to hear that there was going to be a League of Nations in San Francisco. So the elders gathered in Arizona around 1920 or so, and they wrote a letter to Woodrow Wilson, and they asked if Indian people could be included in the League of Nations. At that time, the United States Supreme Court had held that a reservation is a separate and semi-sovereign nation, not a part of the United States, but protected by it. And this was of concern because people didn't want the reservations to become more and more separate. They didn't want them to be considered nations. So they did not write back, and the native people were left out of the League of Nations. So that circle was incomplete. In the League of Nations circle, there was the southern door, the yellow people. There was the western door, the black people. There was the northern door, the white people. But the eastern door was not attended, and the elders knew that peace would not come on earth until the circle of humanity is complete, until all the four colors sit in the circle and share their teachings. Then peace will come on earth. So they knew things would happen. Things would speed up a little bit. There would be a cobweb built around the earth, and people would talk across this cobweb. When this talking cobweb, the telephone, was built around the earth, a sign of life would appear in the east, but it would tilt and bring death. It would come with the sun, but the sun itself would rise one day, not in the east, but in the west. So the elders said, when you see the sun rising in the west, and you see the sign of life reversed and tilted in the east, you know that the great death is to come upon the earth. And now the Great Spirit will grab the earth again with his hand and shake it. And this shaking will be worse than the first. So the sign of life reversed and tilted, they called that the swastika. And the sun rising in the west was the rising sun of Japan. These two symbols are carved in stone in Arizona. When the elders seen these two flags, these were the signs that the earth was to be shaken again. And the worst misuse of the guardianship of fire is called the gourd of ashes. They said a gourd of ashes will fall from the air. It will make the people like blades of grass in a prairie fire, and things will not grow for many seasons. I saw on TV not too long ago they were talking about the atomic bomb, the gourd of ashes. They said it was the best kept secret in the history of the United States. The elders wanted to speak about it in 1920 at the League of Nations. They would have spoken of it and foretold its coming if they could have entered into the League of Nations. So they knew that after the second shaking of the earth and they saw the gourd of ashes fall from the sky, they knew then they would be trying to make peace on the other side of this land. And because the peace attempt on the west coast had failed, they would build a special house on the east coast of this Turtle Island, North America. And all the nations and the peoples would come to this house, and it would be called the House of Micah. It would shine like the mica on the desert shines. So the elders began to see they were building the United Nations made out of glass that reflects like the mica on the desert. So they knew this is the house of Micah, and all the peoples of the earth should go to it. So they met and talked about this. They said that in 1920s they had written and they had not been responded to, so this time they said we better go to the front door of the house of Micah because things might get a lot worse. So elders representing a number of tribes, I believe, drove to New York City. When the United Nations opened, they went to the front door of the house of Micah and they said these words: we represent the indigenous people of North America and we wish to address the nations of the earth. And they said, we're going to give you 4 days to consider whether or not we will be allowed to speak. And they retreated to one of the Six Nations reserves in New York State. The Six Nations reserves are the keepers of the great law of peace of the prophet that appeared here in North America, Daganawida. And this great law of peace is still recited. It takes 4 days between sunrise and noon each year in Indian by memory. It's recited about this time of year. 4 days later they came back, and I believe the nations of the earth, they heard that the Indians had come to the door, and they voted to let the Indians in. They wanted to hear what they had to say. But the United States is one of 5 nations in the United Nations with a veto power, and still they were concerned because this time the native sovereignty was even stronger. And I believe they vetoed the entrance of the native people. So then they knew other things would happen on the earth, and the United Nations would not bring peace on earth, but there would be continuing and deepening confusion, and that the little wars would get worse. But we're in that time now. We're between the first light of a new day and the sunrise. The sunrise is about to come. When it comes up, everyone is going to see it. But you know how it is in the village. There's a few people that get up early, and there's some that sleep till noon. I'm probably one of those that sleeps till noon. The Hopis and the prophecies say there will be a religion that comes here. Maybe it will be true and bring unity, or maybe it will not bring unity. If it does not bring unity, a second religion will come. And the people of this religion are known in the Hopi language as the Baha-Ni, the people of Baha. Ni means people of. Baha, it means light or glory. Baha'i means followers of the light, or the people of Baha. We've been waiting for these people a long time. They say they will bring a teaching that will unite the earth. So, in closing, I would like to call on each and every person, regardless of who you are, young or old, native or non-native, to arise now and to awake, to embrace this time, to learn everything you can about the teachings and the writings, to arise and awake and go forth, all the peoples of the earth. You're going to find them. Peoples everywhere are now receptive to the message. It's time to arise and awake, go forth and teach, walk the road. We call it the good red road, the road that runs north-south. The things that we lost from south to north, but come back from north to south. There's people out there waiting to hear, waiting to hear.
Anything strike you as interesting?
Well, I think it's interesting that, you know, they're saying these things came and they did happen, but I think a lot of the understanding at the times when they're doing it, you know, they call it the bugs and stuff because there was no name for car or automobile, so they referred to it the best way they could, you know, shaped like bugs, so they thought it was a bug, you know, and things like that. But what concerns me now is they're talking about this unity coming now, and that I'm believing that maybe they have that, yeah, it's going to look like unity because they're supposed to be, in a Christian way, a person coming and they will be called the Prince of Peace, or that they will think that they're uniting, but it's actually the devil. And then the real person comes after that, after the reign of that.
Okay, so you're talking about the Antichrist.
Right.
Right.
So I'm wondering if that is this person, but, you know, that's as far as they got in their understanding of it or whatever. Because we have additional texts now that said...
Well, I know that what you just described is a popular teaching among some of the churches. I think it's really on shaky ground, personally. The only time the Apostle John refers to the Antichrist in his writings, he says that, my brothers, you were told that many Antichrists were to come. But he says, but now, 2,000 years ago, many Antichrists have already appeared. He says they went out from us, but they were not truly part of us. So according to John, his definition of Antichrist is people who followed a false form of Christianity. Other than that, he doesn't say anything about an Antichrist. People have made the connection between that and the beast of the book of Revelation and built it into some kind of Lex Luthor compared to Superman type relationship. That's really not in there. Actually, what Jesus himself said is there a time will come, there will be one fold and one shepherd. So, but I'm going to be talking about these kind of things more, and to show you how some of these things happened in the past, and what the expectations were in the past, how they actually unfolded. Usually they're significantly different than what the people originally thought at the time, but I don't discount what you say, and I, appreciate you for saying that. So please speak up. We're actually kind of out of time, but we don't have to leave the room if you don't want to. But part of what I'm going to be talking about is the numbers in the Bible, the numbers in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, about some of the prophecies that were fulfilled in the past, so you can kind of establish a baseline. The whole Left Behind series type of thing of Tim LaHaye, I really don't buy that viewpoint, but I actually don't mind if anybody else believes that. So, so did anybody else have any comments about the video? Fascinating stuff, isn't it? If it's true, as Dr. Seuss said, swallow down with solid, spit out the hot air. I know that this is what the Native Americans believe, so. And that video is available on YouTube if you want to take a look at it again. Au revoir.